Hi, and welcome to NDE Talk. I'm your host, Natalie Higgins. Today's guest is author of Is It Safe to Die? Wife and mother, Kat Dunkel, who joins us today to talk about her near-death experience. Now, during her time on the other side, she was able to visit heaven and hell, and today we get to learn about it. But she also gives us a bit of backstory as to her life's journey, and you'll see how it all ties in together. Now, I'd like to just take a moment to thank all of you who have helped support me on my YouTube journey. And I would also like to ask if you could please like, share, and subscribe, as this does help my videos go a lot further. But without further ado, I welcome you, Kat Dunkel.
Natalie, thank you so much for having me. I enjoy sharing my story with people because I believe it has a meaning. So I'll start off by telling a little bit about my life. I was born into a family with a very angry alcoholic father. He had a job that transferred us all over the country, so we moved a lot, and going into new schools as a child is always pretty traumatic. And I had difficulty learning because they would have different curriculums in the schools. And so when I would get in and start my studies, I'd find the books were different. And so I wasn't able to catch up. So I started developing a very poor self-image, being very self-conscious and afraid of everything. And at home, my whole life was miserable. My mother was a well-educated woman. My father had quit school in the 6th grade to join the Navy in World War II, and was just a very angry man. And they pretty much drowned all their sorrows and difficulties in alcohol. So both alcoholics, angry and unhappy. And so I pretty much grew up that way. And it caused me to have a lot of self-loathing, not understanding who I was or why I was. We had no faith in God at the time, but I did believe in God. I think most children do. And my mom was a Catholic, and so occasionally we would go to church, and I felt a lot of peace there. But I just didn't know anything. The Mass was said in Latin at that time, so I didn't learn anything about God. So I just more or less just assumed God did exist, and when I died, I'd go to heaven like all good little girls do. So, and into my teen years, I really started doubting. I started searching and asking anybody I could to give me any reason to believe in life after death or God. I had a friend that died at 16 in a terrible car accident, and I looked down at him, and he was just, I thought, where did the life in him go? Do we just shut our eyes and it's lights out and our life is over, or is there something more? So I tried desperately. I went to every church I could find to help me to believe in God, and they would say, well, just have faith. And it's okay, how do you get faith? I don't know. I don't have faith. Help me get that. And nobody could give me answers that really made sense to me. So I pretty much stopped believing in God. And then I jumped into a very bad marriage, which a lot of women do when they come up in abusive homes or with low self-esteem, will jump into a marriage that's similar to what they have grown up with, or that's common to them. This marriage to this man I did not love. I had 2 little boys. By the time I was 21 years old, I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He was drunk and couldn't support us. We were in poverty. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible time. He was abusive. I remember being hit in the mouth one time when he had passed out, and I was trying to wake him up, and he came up and hit me, and my teeth went through my lip, and just a lot of terrible things went on. So the boys were crying all the time. They were just 1 and 3 years old at the time. And I went out in the living room, and I remember looking up, we were in Kansas City at the time. I looked up at the sky, and it was all these stars. It was so beautiful. And I thought to myself, there has to be something that created all of this beauty.
Yeah.
And I was crying, and I was just thought, oh God, if you're really there, if you really are there, then if you just give me 1 year of knowing what it was like to be happy, to be loved, to love someone else, I don't know what that feeling even is. And if you would just give me 1 year, then you can kill me, do what you want. I don't care. I just want that 1 year. Well, I just walked away that night because I knew God didn't exist. And it was not long after that, I packed my boys up into an old car with what money we had and a few possessions, and I moved from Kansas City to Seattle, which was about 2,000 miles away. We got into government housing right away. We didn't have any furniture or food to eat or anything. We many times ate Cheerios 3 times a day.
Mm.
We slept in sleeping bags on the floor. And we had a little gas heater that heated our unit where we stayed, and had a little pilot light under it. And we would lay there and pretend that was our campfire and we were camping. So we made fun of it. We could run through the house and play games because there was nothing to break. So the boys thought it was great. And we'd go to the library and get books to read. So they were happy. And I was actually too. I got a job and was able to put together furniture and a little home for us. And life was pretty good. I enjoyed that. The job I had, but like I said, at this time I really had no belief in God. Things had just gotten worse and worse, and so I got a job in an auto dealership, and they didn't know what to do with me. They had me sit down and start calling customers up. So this was actually the first customer satisfaction thing that had ever been heard of in the United States, and it was way back. We're talking about way back in the '60s, early '60s. Car dealerships were pretty much at that time not thought of very highly. These men had to sell cars. They had no women salesmen. As a matter of fact, I tried to sell cars one time. The owner let me do that, and all the men walked off the floor because they wouldn't work with a woman salesman. So, they had to support their families, and even though I had to support mine too, that didn't seem to matter. But so I went back to my job of calling up customers and to see if they were satisfied with a sale or with service work that they had done on their cars. And this job really blossomed into something really great. But I didn't make a lot of money, but it was solid, and they gave me a new car to drive and made me a manager. So that was all good. Well, one day a girl at work came to me and she said, "I've got just the man you're going to marry. He's wonderful. He's going to be calling you tonight." And I was furious. I mean, married, that's not something I even want to even go close to. So it was no. But I got this call that night, and this gentle voice said to me, asked me out to go skeet shooting. Well, I didn't know what a skeet was, and I didn't want to kill one, but we decided to go ahead and go. But the next day it snowed, so it saved the skeet and me too. I found out later a skeet is a little clay pigeon that you shoot up in the air. So it wasn't actually a live thing that I would have killed. Anyway, so we went out on that date that night, and we went out the next night, and the next night, and the next night, and the next night. And on the 27th day, we were sitting having a coffee, and a man that Don worked with came in, and he was just so drunk he couldn't even stand up. And he leaned over the table and he said, "You two need to get married." He said, "What would it take for you two to get married?" And Don looked at him and said, well, Bill, if I had $200, and you have to realize back in the '60s, $200 was like $5,000 a day, we'd go to Reno and get married tonight. And I looked at him and he looked at me, and I had felt in my heart right prior to this terrible fear, because I felt something I'd never felt in my life. I looked at him and he was like a dream. He was handsome and had his own beautiful brand new car and his own home, and he was just everything anybody. And I thought, what does he ever see in me? And so it was just, I was thinking all these things, and then this happened and developed, and all of a sudden he's asking me to marry him. And it was like, what's happening? And of course, I was in shock, and but we left and went to Reno that night, and we were married. And now you have to remember, it was in February. Yeah, there's only 28 days in February. So on our 28th day of knowing each other, we were married. And I kind of thought about, back in Kansas when I made this vow to God, just give me 1 year. But, I just didn't even think about that. Well, on our first anniversary, 1 year later, during this whole year, things were just incredible. The boys had a daddy, which they had always wanted. I would open closets, and there would be crystal and china and things that he had purchased when he was in the Navy. And it was like this unbelievable life that I had for a year. And our first anniversary, just about a few months prior to that, Don had purchased a tavern. He went into business with a friend of his, and he was in real estate and made a pretty good living at that. But he bought this tavern because he always wanted to own his own business with a friend. And so he was all excited about that. So we went out to dinner, had a great dinner on our anniversary. And he said, "Do you mind if we stop by the tavern and see how things are going?" I said, "Well, I didn't want to. I didn't like alcohol for one thing. And to go into this place on our first anniversary and things were so wonderful was not something I wanted to do. But we did. And everybody was gathering around him, patting him on the back and congratulating him about the new business that he had. And there was this one lady that worked there, and she was hanging all over him. It was just so obvious. Guys don't understand these things, but women do. And what I saw just angered me. And I was angry because we had stopped there to begin with. And so the anger in me just started building. And the insecurity that I had all my life
Yeah.
was building up more. And knowing that I wasn't good enough for him, and all these things started coming into my mind. And as it went on more and more, and he was over fixing her necklace on the back, and she was slicking her hair at him, which is obvious sign somebody's flirting. So
Yeah.
I was so furious. I just got up and just walked out. I was just so broken, heartbroken. And it was raining and cold, and I didn't even take my coat, my purse, anything. I just ran, which is something that I had always done my whole life when I was backed into a corner.
Yeah.
And a car came along, and this man said, "Hey, lady, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, "Would you like a ride?" And I said, "Sure." And I hopped in a car with a total stranger. I'm sure he was an angel because he just drove around, and I was crying and crying. And pretty soon I stopped, and he said, "Would you like to go home now?" And I said, "Yes." And so he took me home. He's my
Wow.
little angel. So I went up the driveway to the house, and Don was furious. He was standing at the door and just so angry with me. So we had our first fight. It had been exactly 1 year to the very, very day. And you couldn't help but remember back then when I made this vow and said, "Just give me 1 year." It was 1 year to the very day.
Wow.
So we had our fight, and after that, things, because I guess of my insecurities and everything, we started kind of, just kind of nitpicking, and things just weren't the same. I didn't feel the
Mm.
security that I felt before, and I think that rubbed off on Dawn, and things just weren't the same. And then only night that I worked at the tavern was on Mondays, and we had this big promotional crab feed every Monday night, and the place was just packed. So I worked on that one night, and I didn't want to go in. It was April 6th, and the boys were home with a babysitter, and I remember saying goodbye to them, kissing little Marky on the forehead, and he looked up and said, "I love you, Mom." I said, "I love you too." And I had no more gotten to the tavern and walked in the door, and I saw Don leaning over the counter, talking on the phone intently. And I thought, what could be going on? What's going on? Because we're so busy. And he put the phone down and came, grabbed me by the arm so hard he hurt me, and was dragging me out the door, saying things that I couldn't believe that Marky had been hit by a car.
Oh.
We got to the hospital before the ambulance arrived. Well, it arrived about the same time as we did, and we got out of the car, and this doctor came running out of the emergency room, yelling at us, "How did this happen? How did this happen?" And I don't know how this happened. And they took Marky out of the ambulance, and he was just very limp and pale, and his eyes were shut. So they took him into the emergency, and Dawn and I went into the waiting room. Then we waited. I couldn't pray because I didn't believe in God, and there was nothing to comfort you. But I was in such a state of shock anyway that
Mm.
it probably, nothing was going through my mind. I couldn't let anything go through my mind except that Mark would be okay. I just knew that.
Yeah.
So we went through the night like that, and things would be going on in the hospital. Code red, code red. I knew what that meant when they go rushing into Mark's room. And a nurse came out and told me that I needed to call a priest. And I said, "No, no, I don't want a priest to go in there. I just want you to save my son's life." And I was
Mm.
angry. And a priest did come, and I thought, that's not good. And I told him, "Don't go in there. I don't want you to go in there. They're trying to save his life. Please don't go in there." So he went in, and they shut the door behind him, left us out there. And so later on, Dawn and I walked down the hall, and we were looking out this window below, and I thought, the lights were coming on in houses and the cars were going by, and I thought, they're starting a new day. Just everything's normal in their lives. How can everything be normal? Don't they know what's happening in this hospital? That there's little babies being born on the hall and another one's fighting for his life.
Yeah.
And then I heard footsteps coming down the hall behind me, and I couldn't turn around because I knew what they were going to say. And the doctor said that Mark had died. We walked into Mark's room, and he felt so cold, and I brought the covers up around him, and there was a tear in his eye, and I leaned down and kissed him and said, "Don't cry, Mark, because Mommy's here," as if I could make things okay. Mommy's here. Mommy will take care of you always. And I just collapsed. And we got out and wandered around, got in the car and drove, and I couldn't go home because I couldn't see his toys in his life. But soon we had to. So we got home, and Chris, the other son, was there. I had the two boys before I married Dawn, but Dawn and I also, during the 2 years we were married, had a son together, Dusty, and he was such a blessing. It was something Dawn wanted so badly, and he wanted a boy, and he was a boy. He was perfect.
Yeah.
So we had the three boys. Two of them I had marrying Dawn, and then our son together. So Chris was there, and he came running over to me. He said, "Mommy, did you hear what happened?" And I said, "Chris, I have to tell you that the doctors couldn't fix Mark, and he died." And he just went rigid and started screaming, and there was no comforting him. But so needless to say, life for me was over. I didn't want to live. I had tried 3 different occasions to commit suicide because of the circumstances in my prior marriage and in life just after Mark died. One time I took pills and didn't really want to kill myself, but I just slept for 2 days and had a bad hangover. The second time I had a loaded gun at my head, and Don came in and just took it away from me. And the third time I almost succeeded. We were in Spokane, Washington, and in a hotel, and I was on the 3rd story. I got out on a ledge and was sitting there, was just looking at the cars below and the people going. I thought, I just one more inch, and it's all will be over. All the pain and the horror of life will be over with. And I just kept inching more and more forward. And then I had a vision of my son, Chris, come at me, just like, boom, it's "Mommy, don't." And I just fell over backwards into the hotel room, knowing what would happen to him if I did this horrible deed. And so that was the last time that ever happened. But so your life is going on after Mark died, and things just kind of were falling apart for us. And Dawn and I, arguments kept coming more and more frequent. I was angry, and I just sat. Again, not having God in my life left me with no hope. Two little nuns from the Catholic Church down the street came by one day and were telling me, they said the worst thing. They said, "It's okay because your son's with Jesus now." And I just screamed at them, your Jesus kills little children. And I slammed the door in their faces. And I was so angry at the thought that he could be a God. If he did exist, I hated him. I was so angry and bitter, and just the frustration in me. So they came, and Dawn told me, he said, "We really need to get you out of the house. You've been sitting here day after day, and you can't do that. And some friends are getting together, and I want us to go there tonight." And I'm going, "No, I want to go anywhere. I can't smile. If I smile, I feel this horrible guilt. I can't do this. I don't want to go." And he kept insisting. So we kind of were nitpicking at each other. And by the time we got to the car, we were arguing. Got in the car, we were fighting. The fighting turned into screaming, and he's driving down the road, and I'm screaming at him, and he's screaming at me. And I came across the car with my fist and right in his face, just smashing him as hard as I can. And he took his arm and hit me in the back like this, and shoving me over to the other side of the car. And I saw stars, and I thought, wow. And I just kind of got real quiet. And I said, "Just take me home." So we went home, and he went in and was splashing cold water in his face. And I took the keys of the car and started to go out the door and took the car squealing down the driveway and got out of the freeway and I felt this terrible, terrible pain inside me. And I thought, I got out of the car, I couldn't even stand up. I undid my clothes. It was pouring down rain. And I got back in the car and I thought, I've got to get back home. Something's really, really wrong. The pain just kept getting more and more intense. I got home and I was halfway crawling up the driveway, and Dawn came to the door. Of course, he was absolutely livid and yelling at me. And I tried to crawl past him. I thought, well, I'll call 911, get an aid car or something. And he grabbed me and he said, well, if you're that bad, I'll take you to the hospital. So we went to the hospital and into the room in the bed. I felt a little bit better, but soon these doctors came in and said I had to go into surgery right away, that I had internal bleeding. And they didn't have MRIs and CAT scans and things of that sort then. But they could tell by my blood pressure and that I was bleeding internally. They knew that somehow. So they put me on a gurney, were taking me down the hall, and they stopped, and Don leaned over and he told me that he loved me. And I thought he didn't even like me, let alone love me. But I just clung to that as they took me into surgery. And they put the mask over my face, and I remember seeing the doctors and the nurses and the chatter of the room, and all of a sudden it started fading and getting darker and darker. And I remember I couldn't breathe, and I was struggling to breathe, and my hands were tied down, and I couldn't get the mask off. I couldn't do anything. And it was just getting black, just totally darkness. And this struggle to breathe was horrible, just horrible. And I felt myself then moving into this blackness. And then I was coming out the other side of it, and I didn't have to breathe anymore. I didn't have the mask on. I didn't have to breathe. And I started going down a hallway, and I wasn't afraid. I felt peaceful. I wasn't excited, but I just felt nothing really. I could breathe okay. And I just thought it was strange. And I passed by four human people with street clothes on. They had very concerned looks on their faces. And I thought, why are they concerned? What's wrong? And then I went further, and I saw my husband, Don, and the two boys, Chris and Mark, down below. I'm sorry, Chris and Dusty down below.
Yeah.
And they were by what seemed to be a light stand, and they were crying. And I wanted to tell them, I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm okay. Nothing's wrong with me. And then I got the transmission of, well, they'll be fine, they're okay. And I just went on leaving them, not even concerned that I was leaving them. And then the thought came to me, there is no God. And I heard this horrendous noise. It was just like a freight train just blowing through my head, and a rope that was going through the middle of me like a burning rope a million miles an hour. And then it stopped, and the revelation came to me, yes, there is a God. And I knew it, just like I know that my hand's attached to my arm right here. I knew it. I knew there was a God. There was no doubt or maybe or questions. I knew. And I almost think that noise and that horrendous burning was God just taking my unbelief and the anger and the horrible stuff out of me. I don't know, that's what happened. But then the thought came to me again, there is no heaven. And I saw this brilliance, and I felt myself going towards it, and I knew that was heaven, and I was about to go there. And then the noise had come again and stopped, and that's when I saw the brilliance of this light. And I was going towards it, and so excitement was just overwhelming. And this peace that I'd never felt peace like that of any kind, just this contentment and peace. And I don't know how to explain it. I mean, I can't, but it was wonderful. It was far beyond anything that I could ever explain in human terms, for sure. But then the bottom fell out, and it was like you're in an elevator and the floor just disappeared, and you started falling into darkness. I was falling, and I felt burning, and I heard screaming, and I thought, this is hell. I've fallen into hell. And I knew that I had sent myself there. I knew that through my anger and my bitterness and my unbelief, that I was falling into literal hell. And I was screaming, God, I believe in you now. Please don't let me go into this place. Don't let me be here. But I knew that God didn't even know this place existed. That's what my thought was. Who could throw a rope over the side and save me? Nobody. Who even knew I was here? Nobody. Not even God entered into this place. That I would fall out and burn forever and ever and ever. It would never, ever stop. I knew that. And all of a sudden it did stop. And it started spiraling backwards, back into the tunnel, going down the tunnel back towards the entrance. And then it stopped again. And it came a point where I felt the will to live come back in me. If you've ever seen a person die or seen, there's something leaves their body. And I believe that that's the spirit in them that leaves them. I believe that we all have this spirit, the spiritual self, or we'll call it what you want. Maybe spiritual isn't the right word, but we all have an essence of ourselves that is us. And I felt that enter back into my body. And I heard a voice as clear as day say, bring people to me. And I believe with all my heart that was God. It was a knowing that I knew. And then I felt myself coming back to life. And as that entered back into me, the will to live entered back into me, all of a sudden I wanted to live. Prior to that, I would have left my husband and my children, who I love more than anything on earth. I would have left them to stay where I was with God and in heaven. I would have left them. But now I was excited. I was going to live. I would see my sons again. I would see my husband again. And I came back out of that. And of course, I was screaming to the doctors that I was, I died. There's a God. And they took me into recovery, and Don was there. And there's a God, Don, there's a God. And he believed me. I mean, he's never, ever once doubted me. And because he knew me. And that was 45 years ago. And to this day, I am still proclaiming that God is real. Heaven is real. And unfortunately, there is a place for evil. And, I don't know. I don't feel I'm special in any way. I feel that everyone probably has the same opportunity that I have during the dying process. So I tell people who have had, loved ones that have died, and they wonder, did they go to hell? And I say, no, I don't believe that. I believe that people have this same opportunity I did to believe during the dying process. We don't know. We just don't know. I'm not willing to take that chance, however, and I would hope others don't either, because the life I've lived the past 45 years, my marriage was healed, my children, everybody who knows me well has come to the Lord and has lived a victorious life. I certainly have. I wasn't long after I came back and I was healed that I had a dream about starting a business. I had a high school education. I was never allowed to go to college. I asked my father, my parents, and they said, well, they laughed at me. You're not college material. And so I had just this high school education, which really wasn't an education because of all the transfers that we had all over the country.
Yeah.
And so I went to bed that night, had this dream of starting a business, telephoning customers like I did in my job, but it showed me how to do this. And so I started this business. Well, I don't know if you understand, but today that is something every business in the world does. Customer satisfaction is in every business. We were the very first people that ever did anything like that. And we're back in the early 60s. And it was just simply calling customers up, making sure they were satisfied, and listening to a whole bunch of stuff, writing it down and giving it to the owner so he can correct things and make things better. Well, I went into car dealerships. I would ask them to tell them what I did. They would jump over the desk at me, please, where do I sign up? How much is this? I don't care. I want to do this. And so the business just mushroomed and grew. We paid off our debts. We became very comfortable financially. My children are believers in God, my life has been beautiful. I mean, things happen, of course, but I'm able to handle most anything now. I mean, for what we've been through. And I just recently wrote a book. Is it safe to die?
Yeah,
Because
incredible.
I want, it tells the exact everything in the story of my life, and the good, bad, and the ugly. How I started the business, how the near-death experience changed my life, and anybody who knows me would tell you that I am a professor of God. I am a follower. That's my life, and that's my story. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, and such an incredible story, Kat. I really appreciate you sharing it with us all because I do believe it's quite important for those to know there is a hell and, you should be mindful of how you are on earth because it sounds like during your experience, and might I add, God definitely did listen to you because you asked for that 1 year, you received that 1 year, and after that, it seemed your life went back to the old dynamics and the way that you used to think. And so that in itself is absolutely incredible. So, from what I've learned, we need to really change our mindset about ourselves, about the people around us, because when you did die, you said there is no heaven, and then it appeared, and then there is no hell, and it definitely appeared to you. So, it seems to me that when you do go to that other realm, everything is revealed to you for the way that it is. Because you said it didn't exist, but it definitely did. And so the veil has been lifted and you'd been shown the truth. And can I ask you, do you know those people that you saw? Do you have any idea who they may have been?
Yeah, people have asked me that, and no, I suspect they were probably distant relatives because that's the only thing that makes sense, because they had these concerned looks on their faces, like, that I was in trouble or something terrible was going to happen to me, and so I'm assuming that's who they were. I never knew my grandparents, and I didn't know my great grandparents, so I'm assuming that they were distant relatives, but I don't know. I did want to mention also that I certainly questioned what happened to me. I asked my doctor, could it have been anoxia or lack of oxygen? I went through a very traumatic surgery, and they said no, that you're with general anesthesia, that your mind that could not happen, that you're not
Yeah.
sensitive to stimuli of any kind. And so I've been asked all the questions, trying to find out. And there was a professor at the University of Virginia, and that Dr. Bruce Grayson, and he studied me for over 20 years, and my story's in his book Alive, because he 100%, he's not a believer in God, or was not. I don't know if he is now. This was 20 years ago when he started interviewing me, but he has tried every which way to disprove my story because that was his job. Anyway, 20 years he's spent in near-death experiences, and he 100% knows that what I'm talking about has been really happened. And like I said, his book is called Alive, and my story is in there. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
No, that's perfectly fine. I thought I would ask you, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I really am. It must be extremely hard to deal with such a hard loss, and I am so sorry for your loss.
Oh, thank you. But I have him waiting there for me, and I'm excited about that. And I know he's
Yeah.
far better off than he ever would have been here. So I'm at peace with that. But thank you.
Could you give us an example, Kat, of some of the things that you um, saw whilst you were in hell? Was there any sort of distinct thing that you can remember that you saw that made you really believe that's where you were?
I couldn't see anything. I was in absolute total darkness, and darkness that I have never ever experienced since. It was the total blackness. So, although I could hear things, I couldn't see anything. But I believe that there are different stages of hell. I don't believe I was probably, because people have come back with stories of seeing demons and different aspects of hell. So I don't know where I was. I believe I was in hell. I was in some place in hell. I don't know
Mm.
whether
possibly like one of the higher levels of hell. Like you weren't in the very low part because being that you weren't obviously a murderer or a terrible human being, it was just the way that you felt about yourself. And so maybe you were just at the highest possible level of hell. And
Yes.
it's, obviously changed your life to make you realize that life is actually good for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
45 years I have been changed and I've never
Yeah.
wavered one. And I do spend my entire life, all those years, has been devoted to bringing people to God.
That's such a
That's
beautiful
it.
thing. Yeah. And how has it changed you in your life? Obviously, you're a completely different person. Tell us how, some things that you did after this experience. Did you start telling people about it? How do you bring people to God?
Yeah, well, yeah, I thought to myself, how do I bring people to God? I don't know anything about God. I don't know, anything. So
Yeah.
how do I do that? And I would pray, but I just tell people my story, and I didn't bring anybody to God. I scared them half to death. So it was like, so I thought, well, this doesn't work. But I started going back to church daily. I didn't know any church other than Catholic church, so I went there at 6 o'clock every single morning. And then a friend of mine introduced me to an evangelical church where you didn't learn about God in the Catholic Church at all. But I found peace there. I could pray there. And just my devotion to be close to God drew me there. And I
Mm,
didn't know where else to go. And I had told the priest about my story. And he got really mad at me. He said, "Who do you think you are?" I said,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm nobody, but this did happen. And he walked out and slammed the door. So but there in that church, uh, I uh, I just didn't. I don't know. A friend of mine introduced me to a church where they taught about God, and so I went there on every Sunday and the Catholic church, and then I went to that other church on Wednesday nights, and this pastor was talking about Jesus and talking about God, and I was just couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough. And I started reading the Bible, but it was all mishmash to me. I thought, why'd they write the New Testament? Wasn't the Old Testament good enough? And I just didn't know anything. And but as I started reading the Bible, I read little things that I'd underline, for God so loved, and I put my name in there. So for God so loved Kathy that he gave his only begotten son, that because
Oh,
she believes in him, she'll have eternal life. And shall not die and have eternal life. So I'd underline that, and I would underline all sorts of things in there, and that really spoke to me. And so, my life did drastically change. And then I got the dream to start the business, so I started getting busy and
yeah. That's
with
another
happiness.
question. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
It's another question I wanted to ask. So it seems you've been given a gift of some type from your experience, the ability to dream. Was there any other thing that has changed in your life? Because a few near-death experiences that I've interviewed have had these new abilities because they've been to the other side. Is there anything you could share with us that you've realized that maybe you have now?
Yes, I could feel people's pain. And again, I can't explain that, but I remember walking by a lady in the grocery store, and it brushed her slightly, and I felt this overwhelming sadness and pain inside of me. She didn't look sad. She was well
Mm,
dressed and nice, and we were shopping, but I knew something was terribly wrong. And so I just started to pray for her. And I didn't confront her or anything, but I can feel sadness in people. I can
yeah.
feel this, and I want so badly to involve myself with people, whereas I would never have done that before. So yes, it is an ability, I believe, a gift that was given for a purpose. And
Yeah.
but I mean, I don't feel it's anything special. I think probably everyone, if they tried, could feel sadness in others when they're around them, but we never really put ourselves out there. And I have a tendency to do that, and I wouldn't have before. So yes, but I haven't had dreams as such, or revelations, or anything of that sort since this.
Hmm. And have you ever had any visitations from your son? Have you ever felt him since this experience?
No, I would love that, but no,
Mm,
I haven't. I have never dealt much into mediums or that sort of thing. But I if it really happens, I think that would be I don't know. Maybe maybe it would be good. Maybe it would be kind of scary. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain how I feel about that, but I don't discount it. I don't approve or disapprove of it. I just, I don't know that I would want to.
Yeah.
How could he ever explain to
Mm.
anybody, to me, or I know what peace he's in. I know how extraordinary it is. I'd hate for him to even see the struggles that we have in life.
Yeah.
I have the same struggles every day that you have and everybody else has, and life's not easy. And I have sadness still. I have depression. I have all sorts of
Mm.
emotions. I would hate for him to see that. So I don't know. I'll see him soon enough. Our lifetime is just like a flash compared to eternity, and
Yeah.
there'll be plenty of time.
And you
Plenty of time.
mentioned, Kat, when you came back, sorry, were you given a choice to come back? Because you said that you would have given up your life here to stay there. Did you have a choice to come back, or did it simply just that was it? You came back into your body?
Yeah, I've read accounts where a lot of people make that choice, but I
Mm.
don't recall making that choice. I recall that will to live entering back into me, and that's when I wanted to live. And until that point, I didn't want to come back. It was a time, it's a period where I heard the voice of God say, "Bring people to me," and so it happened so immediately that
Yeah.
I felt the will to live then enter back into my body, and I was awake in the operating room. So I didn't make that choice that I know of.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. And where can the viewers watching find your book, or if they could contact you in order to read your book or just talk to you about your experience, would you like me to link your Facebook on the description bar of this video so that people could contact you?
That would be great. Yes, I wouldn't mind that at all. I'd be glad to give you my email address, or Facebook is just fine, either one.
Yeah.
And the book can be purchased on Amazon. .com. It's called
Mm.
"Is It Safe to Die?"
Yeah, and could
So
you show the viewers the book just one more time?
yeah, this is the book.
Beautiful.
So, and yeah, I spent a year writing it, and so I had it edited and gone over it carefully to make sure that it's what I really wanted to say. But it goes
Mm.
into great depth on what it's like to grow up in a family with angry parents, and
Mm.
have no self-worth, and live in poverty and come out of that. And I think it's a helpful book for people that are struggling. I wrote it because I wanted to help people that were feeling um, guilt or the loss of a loved one, especially. I mean,
Mm.
I think that's where the biggest help has been to people, is to give that book, put that book in their hands, because they've just lost a child. You're going to survive. You're going to live, and it can be
Yeah.
a joyful time. You'll see your child again. This isn't the end. This is not the end. And so, I for that purpose, I wrote the book, and I wrote it to encourage people that are living in poverty, for instance, that you can overcome that too. I was a person with no high school, just a high school education, and
Mm,
no
yeah.
skills or anything. I couldn't even spell or write perfectly, and so all that's been overcome by this, so that people can survive, live well, be happy, and
Yeah. And you're
you
so
know
brave, what you did, you packed up, you took your kids and you lived in a way that was, you were poor in a way, but you were able to make life good still, and you had the courage to do what you knew was best for you at the time. So that in itself is going to help a lot of women out there who are also struggling and going through hard times. So it's a blessing that you were able to share that with us today as well. And
thank you.
good for you on doing that. And I'm so proud of you and your life today.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you, Kat, have anything positive that you would be able to share with the viewers before we go as a takeaway from your experience, and for them to know that, it's not the end. Death is not the end.
Well, I don't know if I have any more to say, but I would like to just pray for the viewers out there. If that's not okay,
Oh,
can I
that
do
would be
that?
absolutely beautiful. Yes, I'd love
Okay, well,
that.
thank you. Lord, we just come before you today and always we lay our lives out to you because we have needs, we have wants, we have uh, things that are going on in our lives that we just don't know how to overcome. But God, you are all powerful. You can save us from the depths of hell. You can take people's lives and turn them around. You can make their lives victorious. And it doesn't matter what their circumstances are, they can be happy. So, God, I just ask you for the people that are listening now that have needs and have hurts in their lives. God, please touch them. Please have them to reach out and to be able to talk to me or to whoever can be of help. I know that you'll guide them to somebody, Lord, that there's somebody in their lives that can help. So, Lord, I just ask for your covering over them right now. I ask, Lord, that they can come to you, that they reach their hands out to you, and God, make it real to them like you did for me. I know I'm not special. I know that each and every one of your children is so important to you. So, God, I just ask you to spread your love throughout. And thank you, God, for being with us this day. In Jesus' name I pray. Thank you. Thank you,
Amen.
Natalie.
Thank you so much, Kat. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today, and I appreciate your prayer very much.
Thank you.
You take care, Kat. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.